I hope you enjoyed those videos about credible sources and Google Scholar. Next, I want to talk about what to do with the information that you find. I've put some slides on Moodle, excuse me, here under 1010 plagiarism slides. I already have them pulled up. It was a PowerPoint, but I turned it into a PDF so that the fonts would stay on different computers. Let's see if I can make it bigger. We're at the end here. Okay. So again, keeping with our Halloween theme, no, that's not what I meant to do. I'm sorry. That's also probably not what I meant to do. Okay, avoiding plagiarism. There are a couple different things that you can do. Summary, paraphrase, and quote. So this is going to be a review for a lot of you. We did talk about summary and analysis earlier in the semester, but paraphrase and quoting, this will be the first time we've explicitly talked about them. So first is summary. Summary involves putting the main ideas into your own words, including only the main points. It's necessary to give credit to the ideas, to the source. And then summaries are significantly shorter than the original and take a broad overview of the source material. Paraphrase involves putting a passage from source material into your own words. You have to give credit back to the original source. It is usually shorter than the original and takes a somewhat broader segment of the source and condenses it only slightly. So a summary is super short. A paraphrase is closer to how long the actual original text was, and we're going to look at some examples, so don't worry. And then quotation, which most of you are probably familiar with. Quoting is when the information is identical to the original and you only use a little bit of that information. And you have to match the source document word for word, and you absolutely have to give credit. So let's see. When and why you would use these, and then we'll look at the examples. You would use these to provide support for claims or add credibility to your writing, to refer to work that leads up to the work you're now doing, to give examples of several points of view on a subject, to call attention to a position that you wish to agree or disagree with, to highlight a particularly striking phrase, sentence, or passage by quoting the original. If you are using a definition or statistics, that information is probably going to come word for word. You'll definitely need to give credit to where you got that information. And then distance yourself from the original by quoting it in order to cue readers that the words are not your own. This is if you don't agree with something, if you're offering a counterpoint in something argumentative. And then expand the breadth or depth of your writing. 6 steps to putting something in your own words. This works for both summary and paraphrase. Reread the original passage until you understand its full meaning. This first one is where a lot of people, myself included, sometimes get tripped up. If you don't really understand what you're reading, you can't put it in your own words. You have to be able to translate it. You have to fully understand. If you're reading something and it just doesn't make sense to you, go to the Writing Center. They can help you. Once you understand the meaning, set it aside and write everything you remember on a note card or a piece of paper or a Word doc. Jot down a few words below your paraphrase to remind you later how you might use this material. At the top of the note card, write a keyword or phrase to indicate the subject of what this summary or paraphrase is about. Then pick the book or article back up and read it again and make sure that you are being accurate with the information that you remember. Because sometimes we remember things the way we want to remember them. Use quotation marks to identify any unique term or phraseology you have borrowed exactly from the source. And then record the source, including the page, on your note card so that you can credit it easily if you decide to incorporate the material into your paper. Some examples. Woohoo! The examples are on Moodle. This plagiarism handout, this is where we are right now. Okay. So this is 2 pages. 2 examples. So the original passage is, students frequently overuse direct quotation in taking notes, and as a result, they overuse quotations in the final research paper. Probably only about 10% of your final manuscript should appear as directly quoted material. Therefore, you should strive to limit the amount of exact transcribing of source materials while taking notes. And then here's your citation. James Lester from Writing Research Papers, 1976. So a good paraphrase, which is, so notice, it's almost as long as the original, the paraphrase. In research papers, students often quote excessively, failing to keep quoted material down to a desirable level. Since the problem usually originates during note-taking, it is essential to minimize the material recorded verbatim, and then it cites Lester and the pages. So you see how it gives the same kind of information, but it's not, they're not the same words. And then look at how short the summary is. And that's totally fine for summary. The goal of summary is to make it short. So students should take just a few notes and direct quotation from sources to help minimize the amount of quoted material in a research paper. And yeah, that's the gist of this original passage. So that's one example. Oh, and then a plagiarized version. And then see if you can find what's wrong with this. Students often use too many direct quotations when they take notes, resulting in too many of them in the final research paper. In fact, probably only about 10% of the final copies should consist of directly quoted material. So it's important to limit the amount of source material copied while taking notes. The biggest thing that stands out for me, at least, is that this, because anytime you have numbers, you have to be very careful. This is word for word, so this needs quotation marks. There's also no citation here, and a lot of the other words are exactly the same, so you don't want to do that. There's another example here. It's a little bit longer. By and large, Yosemite has been preserved as though it were a painting. The boundaries of the park are the gilt frame around a masterpiece, and within the frame we are urged to take only pictures, leave only footprints. There are enormously important reasons to do so. There are too many people coming to the park to do it any other way, and yet I cannot help feeling something is sadly missing from this experience of nature. Looking is a fine thing to do in pictures, but hardly an adequate way to live in the world. It is nature as a place in which we do not belong, a place in which we do not live, in which we are intruders. A tourist is by definition an outsider, a person who does not belong, a stranger in paradise. And that's from Rebecca Solnit's Savage Dreams, A Journey into the Landscape Wars of the American West. So a good summary, so this starts with summary, not paraphrase. Actually, let's just start with paraphrase, because that's what we did last time. So a good paraphrase captures the entire passage, re-expresses it in new language, and is not incredibly short. It's shorter than this, but it's not as short as summary. Solnit argues that because conservation efforts have conceived of Yosemite as a work of art, the park is represented as nature appropriately experienced as one might experience a painting, through sight only. And then they actually say where that idea came from. So they're giving credit right there. While this representation makes sense in light of the throngs of people flocking to Yosemite, it limits the ways in which an individual might experience the park's landscape, since it implies that nature is to be viewed and not altered, and is to be visited but not lived in. And then they cite it again, which is good. The summary condenses, captures only main points, and re-expresses in new language. And note here that this captured the entire passage. This is only the main points. Conservation efforts traditionally have represented Yosemite as a work of art marked by distinct borders, and then they still say where that came from. While Solnit acknowledges that this representation may serve to protect the park, she also suggests that it limits the individual's relationship to the landscape. Yeah, those were the main points. That's the takeaway. And then quotation. So this is sections of the passage word for word, verbatim, and integrates it smoothly. Efforts to preserve Yosemite, quote, as though it were a painting, because that was exactly the words that she used, creates a distance between the visitor and the landscape, and anytime you quote, you have to have a citation. Solnit worries that such distance between nature and visitor implies that nature is, quote, a place in which we do not belong, a place in which we do not live, in which we are intruders. The distanced relationship with a place differs drastically from one in which the individual interacts with and relies upon the land, sometimes altering it and sometimes being altered by it. So that's pretty good. And then plagiarized version. This says, creates a mosaic of copied language and sentence structure, and they have been nice enough to underline the parts that are the same as above. Sometimes we call this patch writing, where you take a little bit and you change it just a tiny bit and put it in. It's still plagiarism. even with a citation. You want to put it in your own words as much as possible, unless you quote it. So Yosemite has been preserved as though it were a framed masterpiece. Those are her words. Within the frame of this masterpiece, within the park boundaries, we are urged to take only pictures. Although this is an important approach to take in visiting national parks, it is not an adequate way to live in relation to a place. When people are told to look but not touch, they are sent the message that this is a place in which they are intruders, a message that may preclude a healthy relationship with the natural world. So there's hope for this person. If you go to the writing center, right, and you have the original passage and you have this, if you had written this, they can help you put this in your own words. What I would recommend is take this, read it, put it away, write it again in your own words without looking at it and see what you remember. That's what's in your brain. That's your interpretation. So those are just some ideas about plagiarism. One thing to think about when it comes to when you need a citation for things, anytime you read a sentence somewhere, so if you're going back and rereading your paper, if you find a place where you can ask, how do you know? Then you need a citation. So like here in the paraphrase, well, they give credit right away. So I guess it's already there because this was a good example. Here, they just have it at the end. They need to incorporate it throughout. So Yosemite has been preserved as though it were a framed masterpiece. How do you know? Within the frame of this masterpiece, within park boundaries, we're urged to take only pictures. How do you know? Like, how do you know this? Do you know the policy? Are you familiar with this? Did you write it? Do you have an uncle who works there? Like, tell us how you came to know this information. Although this is an important approach to take, so this is opinion. When people are told to look but not touch, they're sent this message. And that could be opinion. So then, like, this citation is supposed to just be for all of it. They need to have it at the end, but they also should have it up here as well. We'll talk more about that too in Project 3, but just kind of the how do you know test can be useful when looking at things that come from someone else. So let's jump here. Okay. Citing sources. So you found, so you have found information, you have collected the data and the ideas that you need, you're putting them in your own words. Now you just want to make sure that you're using MLA format for the citations. I've posted one final handout, MLA citations up here, which I think I still have up. This has some information about MLA 8, and it looks a little daunting, and that's okay. This is meant to be something, it's a style guide. It's something that you apply at the end, not something to memorize. So the first part just kind of gives you information about what your paper should look like, and we practiced this with tutorial 1, so you all should be experts by now in that. But parenthetical or in-text citation talks about when you need to cite something, when you directly quote, and gives an example. We just talked about that. How to put that information in a sentence. I'll let you read this on your own. I think the assignment sheet said you need some sort of works cited. You don't need a formal works cited because this is going to be posted online. Excuse me. You will need one for Project 3, but you do need MLA citations. So the works cited page, if you're doing a traditional paper, is set up a certain way. For this, you just need to know how to write a citation that looks like this. So if you find, most of you will probably find web pages. This is how they would look, right? So these are all the parts, and this tells you it's last name, first name, title of page, title of website, publication date, URL, access date. And if you don't have all this information for something, you just put in what you do have. The other thing people might find are online scholarly journal articles. And then they look like this. And then there's more information about what these look like there. There's also free citation builders, where if you have a link to something, it will build out most of the citation. But remember, and it's not cheating to use them, but remember to always check your citation against a style manual. And these will give you manuals. This is manual information. So always check it against something else. As a teacher, I see a lot of students use these, and they give you like 80% of the citation, but you really need to go in and tweak the rest. They're not perfect, except for the Writing Center, of course. We're perfect. So the Writing Center can help you with your MLA citations. So just a little bit of an overview, something to kind of get us started. There's a video here too that talks about citing sources in MLA 8 specifically. So pause this and watch that, or wait till the end of the video and watch that. It'll give you more information. Go to the Writing Center. Remember, you have to do it twice for each project already. For next time, I want you to work on tutorials 7 and 8 and work on project 2. Next week, we're going to start talking about peer review again, because this second project goes really fast. We need time for project 3. And it shouldn't be a radical revision for people. It should just be a change. So send me an email. Come talk to me if you have questions about anything. And have fun working on your papers.